pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another video to celebrate and promote the Reading Women Readathon happening in June, starting today. Kendra Winchester of BookTube fame is also the co-host of the Reading Women podcast, which is excellent. If you're not subscribed to that podcast, go do that now. And the podcast, Reading Women, is having a year-long reading challenge consisting of, I forget, maybe 25 prompts. And this month, the month of June, on BookTube, the Reading Women podcast is sponsoring a readathon to encourage people to fulfill as many of these prompts as they can. Toward that end, even though I'm not a woman, and I am not actually participating in the reading challenge because I OD'd on reading challenges last year, to show my support, I am delighted to be doing this recommendation video for prompt number 4, a short story collection. I've read hundreds of wonderful short stories by dozens of women writers, and I'm going to tell you about a few. Again, this will be an eclectic mix. I'm going to tell you about some female short story writers that I know well, and others that I'm not that familiar with, and I want you to supplement my list in the comment section below. I hope there'll be a lively discussion down there. I'm not very good at describing short stories. I'm not bad at talking about novels, but when you've got a collection of short stories, I'm almost as tongue-tied as I am when I'm talking about poetry. So rather than subject you to my tongue-tiedness about short stories, I'm just going to read you little excerpts, and then you can go and do your own exploration. So I won't say too much about many of these writers, especially the ones I haven't read or read widely in. I also did the prompt about Canadian women authors, and I said I would talk about Alice Munro here, and I have decided I'm not going to spend too much time talking about Alice Munro, because probably anybody who's interested in the short story form period, never mind Canadian short story writers, knows of Alice Munro's work and probably has read it. So all I'm going to say is she is the goddess of the short story. I have several of her collections, and then this selected stories I picked up last year. I haven't had a chance to crack it. Somebody who I know and love on BookTube is doing it for their TBR, for the readathon. I forget who it is, but I love you, whoever you are. But I am going to take a couple extra minutes to promote Alice Munro's co-equal goddess of the short story, and that's Mavis Gallant. Mavis Gallant was also a Canadian short story writer, but she, after divorcing her husband in 1950, she quit her job as a journalist in Montreal and moved to Paris and wrote short stories in English for the next almost 5 decades, most of which were published in the New Yorker, and made her living that way. Her stories, I think, are just as good as Alice Munro's. It depends which day you ask me. One's up, one's down, but they're co-equal goddesses for the most part. And her stories are very much modeled on the life that she led. A lot of her stories are about independent women and men who are living expatriate lives. She's not as well known as Alice Munro, and that is a tragedy as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going to read you a paragraph each from 2 short stories in this anthology. The first story is called O Lasting Peace, and here is most of the opening paragraph. Though my Aunt Charlotte, my sad mother, my Uncle Theo, and I all live together and can see each other as often as we need to, when Uncle Theo has something urgent to tell me, he comes here, to the Civic Tourist and Travel Bureau. He gets in line as if he were waiting to ask about the Bavarian Lakes and Mountains program or the Ludwig II bus circuit. He slides close to the counter. I glance over and suddenly have to look down. Uncle Theo is so small he is always a surprise. He grins, scared to death of me. He is totally bald now, not a hair to stretch sideways. He looks like a child's drawing of 2 eyes and a smile. And then this is the second paragraph of one of her most widely anthologized stories, The Pegnitz Junction. She had a striking density of expression in photographs, though she seemed unchanging and passive in life, and had caught sight of her own face, looking totally empty-minded when, in fact, her thoughts and feelings were pushing her in some wild direction. She had heard a man say of her that you could leave her in a cafe for 2 hours and come back to find she was still smoking the same cigarette. She had done some modelling, not well paid, in middling, ready-to-wear centres such as Berlin and Zurich, but now she was trying to be less conscious of her body. She was at one of those turnings in a young life where no one can lead, no one can help, but where someone, for the sake of love, might follow. So yes, that is Mavis Gallant, one of my favorite writers. She died in her early 90s, about maybe a decade ago. Roxane Gay, I read her debut collection of short stories, Aity, published in 2011, a couple of years ago, and really liked it. And this is the opening to the story Voodoo Child. Roxane Gay needs little introduction on BookTube, I don't think, but I don't think many people have read this collection. When my college roommate learns I am Haitian, she is convinced I practice voodoo, thanks to the internet in the hands of the feeble-minded. I do nothing to dissuade her fears, even though I was raised Catholic and have gained my inadequate understanding of the religion from the Lisa Bonet movie that made Bill Cosby mad at her. In the middle of the night, I chant mysteriously, light candles. By day, I wear red and white, paint my face, dance possessed. I leave a doll on my desk. It looks just like my roommate. The doll is covered with strategically placed pins. I like fucking with her. She gives me the bigger room with the better dresser. She offers to take my tray to the dish room in the dining hall. Yeah. I also want to take a little bit of extra time to tell you about Audrey Thomas, another Canadian short story writer, also novels, but I am mostly familiar with her short stories. The collection that I'm going to give you a couple excerpts from, I can't find it in my messy house. I'm getting ready to move, things are all over the place. But I'll just put the image up here, and that collection, published in 1987, is called Goodbye Harold, Good Luck. Audrey Thomas is still alive, maybe doing a bit of writing. She's in her early 80s. She lives on Galliano Island off the coast of British Columbia. And her short stories are wonderful. I would say she's not on par with Alice and Mavis, but she's up there. She's up there. And she writes a lot of stories about mothers and daughters, divorced women, a lot of stories about the sex lives of single and divorced women, and I think they're just wonderful. I only have printouts of the quotes I put from this book on Litsy, so I don't know the titles of these stories anymore, but they're each of them are from that Goodbye Harold, Good Luck collection. Here's the first one. She wasn't one of us. No amount of silver tea services or lace tablecloths or children's teas could make her so. And she didn't seem to know that. Kept trying and trying until she was worn out. Until when I looked at her one day I thought, that poor woman is at the end of her tether. And could really see it. Her tether. See her straining to break away from it. But the rope only getting tighter and tighter until... And I thought back to the remark she made to no one in particular, to the air or the merciless blue sky, a curious remark as she stepped down from the last of the rickety steps which had been pushed up against the airplane. Stepped down and onto the red earth, which was one of the amazing things about that country, something I never got over, that earth, the color of flower pots, or, in some places, darker, the color of dried blood. Well, she said, blinking behind her spectacles. Well, this time we're determined to make a go of it. And I wish I could tell you the name of this story, because this might be my favorite Audrey Thomas short story, and it's about a woman, you're going to meet this woman, who's sitting in what you're going to hear in the first sentence is an elegant French restaurant, waiting to meet a friend who is maybe standing her up. I am sitting here in this elegant French restaurant, surrounded by mothers and daughters, mothers and sons and daughters-in-law, who probably rang up and made the reservations and arranged for the corsage. Not many children around, but then this is not the kind of restaurant where one takes young children, not North American children. Families with young children are no doubt celebrating at McDonald's or Smitty's Pancake House. I had forgotten it was Mother's Day when I arranged to meet Lydia at this restaurant, and I, as usual, was early. She, as usual, is very late. Perhaps she missed her train connection and will not show up at all. I'd hate to miss her. I'm hardly ever in Toronto. But sitting here surrounded by all these mothers is dreadful. Should I hold up a sign, "I am a mother too," or stand up and show my stretch marks? But then they would think, if she is a mother, where are her children? Why is she sitting alone, corsageless, with no one to buy her an Anna M. cocktail, concocted in honor of Anna M. Jarvis, the foundress of Mother's Day in America? A little card on the table explains the whole thing. Anna M. never had children of her own and died penniless and almost sightless in a quiet sanatorium in Pennsylvania at the age of 84. She devoted her life to Mother's Day and to her blind sister Elsinore. I wonder about Anna M.'s mother naming a daughter Elsinore, especially when the other gets a common garden name like Anna M. Something rotten in the state of Pennsylvania. In a quiet sanatorium in Pennsylvania. I've worked in those places. Hardly quiet. Noisy and rowdy, and the old ladies coming out with words you could hardly believe, throwing balls of shit at one another, puddles forming under their chairs. I didn't mind. I was young. It would never happen to me. I wonder if there were at least 2 pennies in her purse to shut her eyes. Audrey Thomas. Lydia Davis is one of my favorite short story writers as well, and I've only read a handful of her stories, but I absolutely love them. She's an American writer, many of her short stories are like 1 paragraph long, and this is one, and it's called Agreement. This comes from the collected stories published in 2009. First she walked out, and then while she was out, he walked out. No, before she walked out, he walked out on her, not long after he came home, because of something she said. He did not say how long he would be gone or where he was going, because he was angry. He did not say anything except, "That's it." Then, while he was out, she walked out on him and went down the road with the children. Then, while she was out, he came back, and when she did not return and it grew dark, he went out looking for her. She returned without seeing him, and after she had been back some time, she walked out again with the children to find him. Later, he said she had walked out on him, and she agreed that she had walked out on him, but said she had walked out on him only after he walked out on her. Then he agreed that he had walked out on her, but only after she said something she should not have said. He said she should agree that she should not have said what she said, and that she had caused the evening's harm. She agreed that she should not have said what she said, but then went on to say that the trouble between them had started before, and if she agreed she had caused the evening's harm, he should agree he had caused what started the trouble before. But he would not agree to that. Not yet. Anyway. I am right now finally, belatedly, discovering Catherine Mansfield and reading her most famous collection, The Garden Party. This was published in 1922, and she is a New Zealand writer. This is from The Voyage. Fenella's father pushed on with quick, nervous strides. Beside him, her grandma bustled along in her crackling black ulster. They went so fast that she had now and again to give an undignified little skip to keep up with them. As well as her luggage strapped into a neat sausage, Fenella carried clasped to her grandma's umbrella, and the handle, which was a swan's head, kept giving her shoulder a sharp little peck, as if it too wanted her to hurry. Men, their caps pulled down, their collars turned up, swung by. A few women, all muffled, scurried along, and one tiny boy, only his little black arms and legs showing out of a white woolly shawl, was jerked along angrily between his father and mother. He looked like a baby fly that had fallen into the cream. She is amazing. Speaking of amazing, an amazing collection of short stories that I read out of Nigeria, published last year, is What It Means When a Man Falls from the Sky by Leslie Neka Arima. And this is the opening to, I think, my favorite story in that collection, Light. When Annabelle Okwara sent his girl out into the world, he did not know what the world did to daughters. He did not know how quickly it would wick the dew off her, how she would be returned to him, hollowed out, relieved of her better parts. I love Grace Paley, and I haven't read very much of her either. I haven't read this full collection, but I've read, a handful of her stories, and they're unlike any other short stories you've ever read. And the only way to show you, the best way I know how to show you, is to read you the opening from, and this collection was published in 1985, by the way, but the opening paragraphs of this first story, Wants. I saw my ex-husband in the street. I was sitting on the steps of the new library. "Hello, my life," I said. We had once been married for 27 years, so I felt justified. He said, "What? What life? No life of mine." I said, "Okay, I don't argue when there's real disagreement." I got up and went into the library to see how much I owed them. The librarian said $32 even, and you've owed it for 18 years. I didn't deny anything, because I don't understand how time passes. I have had those books. I have often thought of them. The library is only 2 blocks away. My ex-husband followed me to the books returned desk. He interrupted the librarian, who had more to tell. "In many ways," he said, "as I look back, I attribute the disillusion of our marriage to the fact that you never invited the Bertrams to dinner." "That's possible," I said. Just recently I finished reading this collection of short stories by Ramona Osobel, A Guide to Being Born, from 2013, and I absolutely loved it. And let me read you the beginning of it's hard to choose, but one of my very most favorite stories from the book, called Savor. Mabel Lady Finch lived with her dad in a 1-bedroom apartment. The living room was hers, in a complex with a pool and weight room that neither of them had ever used. She could have afforded to move out, but she didn't want to leave her dad alone. He wasn't really completely alone. He had a girlfriend who, Mabel expected, would hang around for the usual month of romancing, then she'd split just like the others. It was like Charlie, which was what Mabel called him, had been given the first volume of a 2-volume set on love. At this particular moment, he was still in the first course of a relationship with a woman named June August. "They figured no reason you can't have 2 months in your name, no law against that," she explained, while Mabel did their spaghetti dishes. She tossed her stringy blonde hair. Charlie put his hand over her knee in a cup, carefully, like she was a firefly he did not want to damage. Mabel left the kitchen and sat down on her pull-out that was not pulled out, and read some of her City College psychology textbook, which surprisingly had a picture of a skier on the cover. Oh my. I haven't read very much Jhumpa Lahiri, but I hear her short stories are wonderful. Her first collection was Interpreter of Maladies, published in 2000, and this is from the story This Blessed House. She was like that, excited and delighted by little things, crossing her fingers before any remotely unpredictable event, like tasting a new flavor of ice cream, or dropping a letter in a mailbox. It was a quality he did not understand. It made him feel stupid, as if the world contained hidden wonders he could not anticipate or see. He looked at her face, which, it occurred to him, had not grown out of its girlhood. The eyes untroubled, the pleasing features unfirm, as if they still had to settle into some sort of permanent expression. Nicknamed after a nursery rhyme, she had yet to shed a childhood endearment. And finally, the Chinese writer Ian Lee. I haven't read anything by her, but I just found out that I have this collection of her short stories, 1,000 Years of Good Prayers, published in 2006, available to me on Scribd. So here is the opening to the story, Immortality. His story, as the story of every one of us, started long before we were born. For dynasties, our town provided the imperial families their most reliable servants. Eunuchs, they are called, though out of reverence we call them great papas. None of us is a direct descendant of a great papa, But traveling upstream in the river of our blood, we find uncles, brothers, and cousins who gave up their maleness so that our names would not vanish in history. Generations of boys, at the age of 7 or 8, were chosen and castrated, cleaned, as it was called, and sent into the palace as apprentices, learning to perform domestic tasks for the emperor and his family. At the age of 13 or 14, they started to earn their allowances, silver coins that they saved and sent home to their parents. The coins were kept in a trunk, along with a small silk sack in which the severed male root was preserved with herbs. When the brothers of great papas reached the marriage age, their parents unlocked the trunk and brought out the silver coins. The money allowed the brothers to marry their wives. The wives gave birth to their sons. The sons grew up to carry on the family name, either by giving birth to more sons or by going into the palace as cleaned boys. Years went by. When great papas could no longer serve the imperial masters on their wobbly knees, they were released from the palace and taken in by their nephews. Nothing left for them to worry about, they sat all day in the sun and stroked the cats they had brought home from the palace, fat and slow as they themselves were, and watched the male dogs chasing the females in the alleys. In time, death came for them. Their funerals were the most spectacular events in our town. 64 Buddhist monks in gold and red robes chanted prayers for 49 days to lead their souls into the heaven. 64 Tao masters in blue and gray robes danced for 49 days to drive away any evils that dared to attach to their bodies. The divine moment came at the end of the 49 days, when the silk sacks containing their withered male roots were placed in the coffins. Now that the missing part had rejoined the body, the soul could leave without regret, to a place better than our town. All right, well, those are 10 female short story writers that I'm really excited about, most of which I have read. Have you read any of these? Which of these writers would you be most likely to read based on the excerpts that I shared with you, and what other female short story writers would you recommend? Happy reading! Happy readathoning if you're taking part. And I don't think I said, all of the details on the readathon and the podcast will be in the show notes below. Thanks for watching.